The quest for peace anywhere in the world, to include our country, faces so many challenges and concerns. A year after the signing of the comprehensive agreement on the Bangsamoro, the passage of the draft Bangsamoro Basic Law is the last hurdle to win the peace for all Filipinos united under one flag, one nation. It is for Congress to do what's right with reason for the greater national interest. And joining us tonight on NewsLife is Dean Julkipli Wadi of the Institute of Islamic Studies at the University of the Philippines. Good evening, Dean, and welcome to NewsLife.
Hi, good evening.
Now, Dean, it's been a year after the signing of the comprehensive Bangsamoro agreement. Now, are we now that close to silencing the guns of war in the homeland of our Muslim brothers?
Well, it's quite unfortunate because there's an ongoing war between the armed forces of the Philippines and the Bangsamoro Islamic freedom fighters. We are not happy that this new round of war is going on because the ideal is that at a time that we are about to pass or say discuss the Bangsamoro Basic Law, the ground should at least be silenced in terms of the skirmishes of the armed forces in Moro France. But we are experiencing new round of skirmishes. This is not a good sign. We just hope that we would be able to transcend that part and we could concentrate in the serious discussion of the Bangsamoro Basic Law after the tragedy of the Mamapasano incident, so that at least we will be sure that by 2016, if the issue of the BBL is finalized or if the draft is passed and transformed into a law, then at least there will be no serious hurdles or problems we will face by 2016.
Now, the President Aquino is determined to have the draft Bangsamoro Basic Law approved, and now he's actually pushing for a national summit to review the law. Now, will this help in addressing some of the provisions deemed unconstitutional?
Well, I don't know what's the direct connection of holding a national summit with the issue that is actually raised by Congress in terms of the constitutionality of the draft Bangsamoro Basic Law. Perhaps this will, the summit will help somehow in terms of tempering the rather negative perceptions of people, especially after the Mamapasano incident. But I think the more serious one is that Congress and Malacanang should really work in tandem or in coordination in order to somehow see the extent of the claim of unconstitutionality of the draft BBL. As mentioned, there were around very serious constitutional questions, at least 7 provisions accordingly that are really unconstitutional. So will the MILF agree to the versions of Congress if and when Congress will come up with a separate version or a different version of the law vis-a-vis the draft BBL. So this is the most serious one.
Now, with all these issues hounding the Bangsamoro Basic Law, what do you think is needed to be done for this to actually be approved or passed, not just for the sake of passing it, but actually passing it with that clear sincerity that this would actually pave the way for peace in the future?
You know, Robert, we've been saying since day one that there has to be very clear national peace policy and strategy that the Aquino administration has pushed in order to somehow the 3 branches of government, the judiciary, legislative, and the executive, would be able to take some degree of coherence in their position. And by then, there could be coordination between and among these branches of government. For instance, I know for a fact that there was a legislative executive development committee, or what was referred to as the LEDAC during the time of President Ramos, But I had not heard any news of the LEDAC being actually organized or constituted. That is actually intended to temper possibilities of differences of position between the executive in Congress. So if only we had actually formed or constituted the LEDAC, then we could have tempered even as early the gap between Congress and the executive. So to me, I think it's not yet late for Malacanang to contemplate of having organized the LEDAC, so that I think this will be the body that we really scrutinize seriously the versions of Malacanang, the versions of the MILF, and the versions of Congress, and how this group would be able to somehow unify the varying positions of the three major parties, that is the MILF, Congress, and Malacanang.
Now, Dean, having said all that now, how important now is a massive information campaign to explain to our people the long-term impact of peace?
Well, it is indeed important, because if we had seen the result of the recent survey of the Pulse Asia, and accordingly, there's quite low support from the Filipino public as far as the Bangsamoro Basic Law is concerned. Although there's still substantial sectors of society who still undecided. So therefore, the thrust is actually to transform these undecided sectors to support the BBL. But Robert, the Bangsamoro Basic Law is not a popularity contest. You know, what is really matters is really what Congress should do as far as its version of the draft of the Bangsamoro Basic Law is concerned, and how far would their version be as far as the present draft is concerned. In other words, if it's too far, the gap is so wide, so we are afraid that the MILF will not accept it. And in that connection, Malacanang has to come in, and therefore patch up the positions of both Congress and the MILF, so that the problem would not widen, and therefore the process would continue. Especially that Congress is a critical party in coming up with a law that is both reflective of the Constitution and the comprehensive agreement on the Bangsamoro.
Do you believe that we still have the time now to actually iron out all these issues and come up with an agreement between the government and the MILF in terms of all these issues?
Well, I don't want to be pessimistic, but you know, more than a year. I think the administration is only more than a year and few months. And few months from now will be actually the mood of election, 2016 election will be setting in. So I'm afraid all this will affect the supposed serious discussions of the BBL. Because by that time, I think politicians would not be talking on the basis of principles as far as the BBL is concerned, but I think they would somehow be making postures, and because they're talking of what will the BBL do to myself, rather than what they will do to the BBL. So that is quite a serious problem. But again, as I said, we don't want to be pessimistic. We just hope that there will be something what you call this critical that must happen, that will convince Congress to really reverse the negative impressions on the BBL, especially after the Mama Pasano incident.
And finally, Dean, what do you think should be the next steps? What is how do we actually show everybody that we actually need this?
Well, we had a recent forum. An organization invited me to speak a few days ago in UP of what must be done. Well, I just mentioned the need to even possibly contemplate of Plan B, so that we could at least temper the possibility of the BBL being not passed in Congress, So we have an alternative, an option. Some Mindanaoan group is now talking of federalism, but I would say, I guess, even thinking or contemplating of making the process inclusive and comprehensive, to me, I think is still a viable option, because this is the original vision of the government, making the peace process inclusive and comprehensive. But I think by mid-term of the Aquino administration, because of the Lahad Datu incident and the war in Zamboanga, somehow the focus was just a peace process with the Moro Islamic Liberation Front. My fear with that is, if we will not make the peace process inclusive with other groups, is that other groups who are not part of the process will make this as an issue after 2016. And therefore, they will probably pose threat again and problems. So in other words, before they do that, I think it's logical that we make them part of the process, so that they will feel they have some sense of ownership to the process. And therefore, there could be some kind of a collective position or unified position.
Well, lots to do,
many
but
sectors of the Bangsamoro.
it can be done. It can be done.
I think it can be done, because if the previous administration had done that, like the Ramos administration, for instance, had done that. In other words, when the Ramos administration was negotiating with MNLF, then it was also signing a new agreement with the Moro Islamic Liberation Front. So what I'm saying, if the previous administration had done this, had done it, then I cannot find any reason why the Aquino administration could not also advance the idea of an inclusive, comprehensive peace process.
Okay, on that note, thank you very much for joining us here tonight on NewsLife. That was Dean Julkipli Wadi of the Institute of Islamic Studies in UP. Thank you so much.